So, Bhikhu, last time we were talking about identity and the importance of the distinctive way in which you think of identity and the contrast that that has between the liberal view, which is a very simplistic view for many of us. And one of the key ideas in your thought, it seems to me, particularly when we look at things like the Parekh report and so on, but also your more recent work on the new politics of identity, is this notion of hyphenated identities. And obviously it's a crucial idea in relation to modern Britain and in relation to many modern societies. This idea of having been British Indian or West Indian English. So I was wondering if you could say some more about the importance of hyphenated identities, how that fits within your theory of multiculturalism.
Yes, I think the whole notion of hyphenated identity arises because the old idea of citizenship is something homogeneous, all-absorbing, and obliterating all other identities is no longer acceptable in a culturally diverse society. In a homogeneous society, or even in a diverse society where it is believed that your religion, your culture, your ethnicity are all private matters with no public significance, then you appear in public life only through your political identity as a citizen. And therefore you are a British citizen or an American or a French or whatever. This came to be challenged in a multicultural society where people say, look, of course we have this common political identity, but I also happen to be a Muslim. I also happen to be a Scot, a Welshman, an Asian. I want these things to be recognized. I don't just want them to be privatized or thrown into a kind of, and private life being a kind of dustbin. I want them, I cherish them, and in public I appear not only as a citizen, but I also appear as a Muslim. I wear my cap or whatever. Now it's to answer that kind of dual self-definition that this idea of hyphenated identity first appeared in the United States, where the noun represented the political identity and it was adjectivized by ethnicity. So we are Polish American, Hungarian American. American represented the noun, the substance of who you are. And that's what you share with others. The Polish bit was meant to qualify it and to show that you are, and what the Polish bit was, I am an American, but do remember I came from Poland and I am American in a Polish way. Now in Britain, there is a slight difference here, that when we talk about a British Muslim, we are not just saying that I'm a British, but I also happen to be a Muslim, that my Muslim identity matters to me just as much as my political identity, but at the same time it matters in a different area. My political identity matters as a citizen, my Muslim identity matters so far as I live as a Muslim, practice as a Muslim, which I might manifest in public life. So I think what has happened is that this idea of hyphenated identity has allowed minorities to belong to a receiving society, to feel at home and to find a space for themselves. So the hyphen has created a space within this otherwise homogeneous, solidified identity for someone to say, look, this is where I stand within this larger framework.
And this difference between European countries and North American countries is something that you explore in your work. The fact that European countries generally have a more solid, historically grounded culture, and North American country, particularly the United States, is a country that has been built up through immigration, and this is a profoundly important feature for their work. So, do you think then this presents particular challenges for a country like Britain or other European countries that maybe aren't so much of a challenge in the US?
Yes, I think it does. It does pose a greater challenge in Europe than in the United States. The United States is and recognizes itself as a land of immigrants. So it's a country made by immigrants where people have come in, changed it, and although the WASPs continue to be the dominant group, nevertheless others are being recognized, and with the passage of time, who knows, there might be a majority shaping the future of the country. Now, to unite those kinds of groups, Americans have relied upon the Constitution as a central organizing principle of American identity. To be an American is to take a pledge to the sanctity of the Constitution, full stop. Beyond that, you are free to live the way you want. Here, we don't have any such overarching political ideology. So that in Britain, for example, if I were to say I'm British, the question immediately arises, what are the values that I stand for? And they are difficult to specify. So one then slips into the cultural mode. To be British is to love dogs, to love tea rather than coffee, and that kind of thing, where culture begins to dominate the identity rather than a set of political principles. Now, in that kind of situation, a nation-state kind of situation, which is what Europeans are, how do you make space for a hyphen that we were talking about earlier? If a hyphen represents my ethnicity, then that which is being hyphenated itself is ethnic. How do the two combine? Now, these are some of the dilemmas that we have been facing in this country, and leads to some tragic situations as well as some hilarious situations. For example, if one were to say, if, let's say, Scotland were to separate from Britain tomorrow, England were to become a separate country, and if somebody said, are you English? I, as an Indian who has grown up in India, what would I say? Today, if I am asked, are you British? I would say unhesitatingly, yes, I am. Are you English? No, I'm not. Because Englishness, unlike Britishness, is an ethno-cultural category, refers to race, ethnicity, culture, history, and so on. The Britishness is, if you like, the American ideological bit. But then the question is, if England became a separate country, an independent country, would I still be able to make that kind of point and say, look, I'm not quite English, in which case who I am? An English citizen, but not English? So I think in European context, you really have this problem, and what we are doing is to work out a new way of defining hyphenated identity. And newness is seen at a variety of levels, one of which is that our hyphenated identity, there is no hyphen. If you say I'm a British Indian, there is no hyphen between British and Indian. I'm a Polish American, and you have a hyphen there. So I think there are various ways in which, over the years, we'll have to find ways of expressing our hyphenated identities.
It's an interesting problem, isn't it?
It is.
Given that devolution is a real possibility in the future, depending on other changes as well.
Sure.
Then it could raise huge issues for those within cultural group, ethnic groups, and the minority groups around in this country.
And you also have this funny situation where there are some people who have hyphenated identities, people like myself and other my immigrants. There are others who don't have hyphenated identity, like yourself. So the question is, are they a superior class of citizens whose identity is totally one with that of the larger community? Or are they second-class citizens like me? You get into these kinds of situations sometimes, but I think by and large, it's recognized that hyphenated identity is a valued, a publicly cherished form of identity.
But given that hyphenated identities and those people with them are often the ones that enrich a culture, in a way that, my family all grew up within 30 miles of where I was born, really. But what's really pushed the country forward has been the input from India, China, and so on. There's various places that have had particular regional impacts as well, and really enriched cultures. So it does seem that hyphenated identities are part of a wider evolving story about the evolution of British and maybe even English identity as well, that it becomes more difficult to keep those very monolithic notions of an identity, a British identity.
And it's also a generational factor.
Yes.
I mean, let's say I would want to maintain a hyphenated identity. My children who were born here and raised here may not, and their children certainly would not.
No.
So hyphenated identity is a transitional phenomenon, allowing minorities to belong to the country and to make it belong to it, and giving them a kind of breathing space in which they recognize both their own identities, which they came with, and the identity they are now asked to embrace. And over time, making way for others for whom there is nothing they brought from outside, because they are simply products of this particular culture.
Does that mean then that it's more likely that culture will become less of a marker overall, and that identities won't be built around notions of culture so much, because people don't have these easy identifications anymore?
Yes, I wouldn't say it wouldn't matter at all, because you remember sometimes you have a situation where the third generation desperately wants to remember what the second is keen to forget. So while my children might not want to remember their own language, their children might say, look, what was the heritage that the grandpa brought with him? So I wouldn't necessarily see a progression in this. That therefore, that because what their parents brought with them becomes less and less important, culture becomes less and less important, because suddenly they might find a period in history where, or a context where culture becomes a badge of identity. So that Indians, even after 50 years or 100 years from now, watching cricket, might say, look, they identify with India, although India, apart from in other matters, means nothing to them. I did some work on the Indian diaspora, which will amuse you. Now, this is diaspora, Indian diaspora, spread in over 44 countries. West Indies, nearly 120 years, South Africa. Even where Indians have settled for nearly 150 years, my question was, in those countries, what have they kept and what have they discarded? And it's very striking, Colin, that there are 3 or 4 things which do not change.
Yeah.
Ladies' clothes. Men's put on trousers, but the ladies would always wear saris. Certainly on occasions. Food. The curries. Music.
Right.
And stories they tell their children. Some of these things remain absolutely constant. And even if they change it, somehow something in them takes them back, and the ethnic memories are revived. So even when I went to the West Indies a few years ago to inaugurate their 150th anniversary of the first landing of the Indians, in my keynote address, and as I walked around, I was struck by the way in which these ladies, who had no contact with India for 100 years, had still retained a little India, and I could recognize myself. A stranger, complete stranger, came up to me and he addressed me as an Indian would have addressed me in India. He looked at me and said, Professor G. Now this use of the word Professor G would come instinctively to an Indian and came instinctively to this West Indian gentleman who had never been to India. So in that way there are collective memories. Culture does play a part, but you are right, it may not play so significant a part, but it does play a part.
But it's an interesting, very external and visible way of identifying with your culture, isn't it? It's a pronouncement to other people.
Exactly, of who you are and where you come from.
Yes.
And how you differ from them.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it's fascinating.